Okay, so let's get started. Welcome everybody. My name is James Yellowlees. I'm the president of Pacifica in Tokyo, and today we have the Whiskey Fund. The presenter today is Benjamin Tsai, the CEO of Wave Financial in LA. 皆さん、こんにちは。パシフィカのジェームスと申します。今日はウイスキーファンドのプレゼンテーションがありまして、一応、Wave Financial、ロサンゼルスにある Wave Financial の、CEO ベンジャミン・サイさんが、プレゼンテーションします。So a bit of background about Wave Financial. It's a Los Angeles-based, very innovative financial firm, about $1 billion under AUM, and very innovative in this whiskey fund. This is the second whiskey fund, and also NFT fund and other innovative products. この Wave Financial はロスにありまして、一応、1000億以上の AUM がありまして、一応、NFT ファンド、それ以外のウイスキーファンドもあります。Bit of background about Benjamin. He previously was with Bank of America and ran the head of commodities for Merrill Lynch in Tokyo and Singapore. After that, he was the head of Asian alternative strategies in Asia Pacific for AllianceBernstein. So he has a lot of experience in Japan and in the region. Benjamin Tsai さんのバックグラウンドですけれども、一応、Bank of America の東京とシンガポールの支店のコモディティーズのトップだった。また、メリル・リンチの、コモディティーズのトップでしたね。または、アライアンス・バーンスティンという会社の、AP、アジア・パシフィックの、alternative strategies の、ヘッドでした。So today, Ben is going to present his whiskey fund. And today we're doing it in both English and Japanese. And we have a question and answer period. It'll go about 40 minutes for the presentation, and then we'll have question and answer. And so then Ben will handle the question and answer in both English and Japanese. これから40分ぐらいのプレゼンテーションがありまして、その後は Q&A。Q&A は一応チャットを使ってください。日本語でも英語でもいいんですので、よろしくお願いします。Okay, so Ben, would you like to take over?
Hi, James. This is Benjamin Tsai. Hello. I am unfortunately not able to turn on my video, James. So I don't know if you can enable that. I can try to share my screen, which would be our presentation.
Yes.
Is the presentation showing for you?
Yes.
Great. Okay. So I'll base my discussion, I guess, with the presentation. I prepared the presentation in Japanese, so hopefully that'll help. And we'll keep the presentation in English for now, but happy to do any of the questions in Japanese. 一応日本を結構長く住んでましたので、日本語でも質問など受け付けてます。I'll start with a little bit about my background. I think James mentioned my background a bit, and I think that's probably a good place to start. And, it's not in the presentation or anything, but, I'll talk a little bit about my background. I actually spent 4 years as an engineer in Japan. I used to work for NEC and also a US semiconductor firm. I was there for about 4 years. Went back to business school and then came out again and worked at Merrill Lynch Japan Securities from 2001. And I was there for a total about 15 years, or sorry, about 12 years. And a part of that, they sent me out to Hong Kong and sent me out to Singapore. But I was really an employee of Merrill Lynch Japan Securities. So I think that was something that I was quite proud of. I have the Nishu, the Ishu, and the Naibu Kanri Sekinisha licenses in Japan, along with licenses in the US, in Hong Kong, and in Singapore. Thereafter, I went over to AllianceBernstein, based in Singapore. And then from there, I was running alternative investments, and I spent time there along with Taiwan. So, spent quite a lot of time in Asia and have, worked at, in the finance industry. So from there, I think, I went back to the US about 5 years ago, and I started going down the path of blockchain, cryptocurrencies, and looking at alternative investments. And About 3 years ago, I founded Wave Financial, and this is the firm that is bringing you the Wave Kentucky Whiskey 2021 Digital Fund. So just getting into actually the fund itself. We'll share this, James will share this presentation with all of you later on, so I'm not going to go through every single slide. It's actually a relatively long and detailed presentation. So I'm just going to flip through and highlight a few of the points, and I would love to address a lot of these issues in much more detail thereafter. First things first, we launched a 2020 digital fund actually last year, and it was quite successful. We actually won the 2020 TADS award at Hong Kong Blockchain Week, and we were awarded the best of class asset-backed token last year for our project. So with that success, we are now launching our second fund, the Wave Kentucky Whiskey 2021 fund. So it's the fund for this year. Last year's fund basically closed, and we have bought a whole bunch of whiskey with that money already, and I'll get into that in just a bit. And actually, a number of investors were originally from Japan also. So this product has been popular in Japan. Just I'll start by talking about the age of whiskey and the profile that we're looking at, and the investment opportunity from a whiskey perspective. One of the things I've found out after spending a lot of time in Kentucky, I was out actually in Kentucky 3 times in the first 6 months that we were launching this product. We found that the price of whiskey actually increases very significantly over the first 5 years of its aging. And this is something that we found very attractive, and we thought it'd be good to try to capture as an investment return. What we're able to do is we're able to buy a barrel of whiskey for about $1,000, actually a little bit less than $1,000. And then we add storage and we add insurance costs. And so we're looking at roughly $1,000. And over 5 years, that whiskey will rise to a value between $3,000 to $5,000. And actually, the best way to say that is right now, a 5-year-old barrel of whiskey is about $3,000 to $5,000. That means that we're looking at a 3x to 5x return profile over 5 years. So I think that that's an extremely attractive return profile. So I wanted to capture that return. We did actually a lot of research to make sure that that is something that it will stay and be stable. So we've hired consultants and we've hired advisors in Kentucky who are looking at market data, who are also looking at data available on the ground with the distillers. And where we had our consultants do a lot of that data compilation. And on an annual basis, they provide us with data that we come up with a research report on the whiskey market. We have one for 2020 in the spring, and we have one this year in 2021 in the spring. So we'll be happy to make that report available to you also. But basically what we find is really the high-end premium, the super premium category, which is the category most people are consuming at. We're looking at a compound average growth rate of 6 to 7%, and to be exact, 6.6 to 7.4%. And that's over a period from 2018 to 2024. So we're looking at another 3 years of growth at this rate, which is the estimate. And this need is actually growing because there's a lot of demand domestically in America. We're also seeing growth overseas, and that is also contributing to this target. And we are basically forecasting that this will continue to grow, and we're comfortable with that growth. Getting into a little more detail, we took a look at whiskey compared to some of the other alcohols in America. In America, actually, whiskey is the largest, has the largest share out of all the different types of alcohol that's produced in the US, and that's exported. And that's something that, we're very happy to see. And this makes us comfortable that we're facing with a large market. It's actually not a tiny little market. It's a very large market that we're facing. And that market, just in terms of sales, we're looking at somewhere in the ballpark of $10 billion, in terms of this year in size. And we're looking at that growth consistently all the way out to 2024. And unfortunately, industry data is only compiled for 3 years. That's why we have data up to 2024, no further. But there's a general consensus that it'll continue to go up. And as it goes up, actually, we're expecting the share of whiskey will go up higher compared to the other alcohol also. So from that perspective, it's an extremely attractive asset class with upward rising pressure due to extreme high demand for alcohol. One funny side note, if you look at the chart, you'll notice that 2020, the amount of alcohol that's sold actually didn't go down very much because of the pandemic. And what has happened is that a lot of consumption of alcohol actually moved from restaurants, bars, and clubs actually back to people drinking at home. So people are drinking less outside, but they're drinking more inside. And from a whiskey sales perspective, at a top level, at a distiller level, the amount of whiskey that's sold actually is higher, and there's more demand in 2020. So from that perspective, it was very interesting. Whiskey is a little bit of a counter-cyclical type of consumption goods. So that's an area of interest. Moving forward, as I mentioned before, even with the drop in 2000, with the drop of COVID and so forth, the sales of alcohol actually didn't drop that much. People continue to consume alcohol, and it's a very steady rise. So it was flat last year. But it was very, very solid. I think the only time we saw a little bit of a drop, and it was a very small drop of only 1.4%, was during the financial crisis. And since then, it's been rising every single year. And even that drop was very, very small. So even in a financial crisis, the impact to alcohol was very small. Moving forward, as I mentioned before, we're looking at taking a barrel, have that value of that barrel growing up to $3,000 to $5,000, and that's something that we're very comfortable with. And we look at it from a top-down perspective, as I just shared with you the market information, and we also see it from a bottom-up perspective. And I'll talk about the bottom-up in just a bit. With that return profile, we believe that we can package this in a fund format, and that fund format we can provide a return profile of over 20% IRR. So over 20% a year gain in value on a net basis being after all the expenses and after our fees and so forth. And that gives us very roughly an equity multiple of 2.3, which is extremely attractive for this asset class. Moving on to talking about the fund itself, I think, the idea of what we're going to do is we're going to take investors' money. We are going to buy the barrels. The barrels will be made on our behalf, so it's fresh. So it starts at age 0. We're going to hold those barrels for the span of 5 years, and we'll start selling from around year 4 all through year 6 and try to wrap this fund up in 5 to 6 years. And that is the target of what we want to do. And one big question we get asked a lot, and I'm trying to address here with this slide, is what are we doing with the alcohol? Where are we selling it into? So there's actually, 3 major markets that we sell to. One is we can sell it back to the distiller that made it for us. Obviously, they know, what went into it. They know the aging process, and therefore they're potentially a good buyer of the whiskey. Now, there are other makers and other distillers in Kentucky that are willing to buy. There are in Kentucky, the barrels are actually traded quite often among the distillers and between whiskey makers, because there are a lot of what's called NDPs, non-distiller producers, who do not have an inventory of old whiskey. All they do is they buy barrels, they blend it together and sell it under their own brand. So that market is actually very vibrant, and we're actually working with dealers right now to source us pricing quotes and so forth for that market. And we're pretty comfortable that we could sell our inventory through that market. At the same time, we're looking at other markets that we could potentially sell into. One very interesting market is international, and all of you are in Japan, so the international angle could be very interesting. American whiskey, the biggest export markets, number 1 is actually Spain, number 2 is Japan, and number 3 is Australia. Spain and Europe in general typically buy whiskey at a much younger age. So they're taking 2-3 year age whiskey, they're buying that, they're shipping it to Europe, they're bottling it and then selling into Europe. Typically that is a lower price point product. It's a cheap American whiskey type of marketing. And then we have Japan, which is actually on the other end of the spectrum. Japanese drinkers are typically expecting 8, 10, 12-year plus aging. So something like a Blanton's, which is actually a Japanese brand, or Jim Beam or something. These are Japanese owned brands. Jim Beam's owned by Suntory. Um, Blanton's is actually owned by Takara Shuzo, and there's Four Roses owned by Kirin. So these are all brands that are, a lot of that inventory is being sold into Japan, and Japan typically prefers the older, more aged whiskey, and it's sold as a premium product, American bourbon. And Australia is more kind of overall quite wide. And the reason I told that story actually is that the rest of Asia, if you exclude Australia, if you exclude Japan, the rest of Asia actually does not drink a lot of American whiskey. If you go to Hong Kong, you go to Singapore, you go to anywhere in China, you go to India, the main whiskey they drink are Scottish whiskey. They actually prefer that. There's historical precedents for that. In India, it's a very aspirational thing to drink Scottish whiskey. They were a British colony. This is something that they look up to. But with that said, we're hoping that there's going to be a change in opinion, a change in direction, and having people drink more American whiskey, and that would significantly increase the demand, even with a small change in taste. And we've seen something like this happen before. Many years ago, when I used to live in Japan, Japanese whiskey was very often available, and a lot of that is bottled Scottish whiskey, but under Japanese labels, and they were not considered premium products so much. But over the past 10 years, 15 years, Japanese whiskey has really caught on as a high value premium product, and a lot of the Asian drinkers are drinking Japanese whiskey and hoarding Japanese whiskey as a collection. So that's really driving the price up. And I could potentially see that in the bourbon space over time and as the next alternative product. So we find that quite exciting. So the international markets is a second category we think that's interesting. There's a third market, which is private sale to retail investors. A lot of times in America, large groups will travel to the likes of Kentucky, go to the distiller, do a tasting over 5, 10 different barrels. They pick one they like the most, they buy that, and it's bottled for them. That's exciting, that's fun, but they typically pay about $10,000, $12,000 for that barrel. So much more than our estimated price. The problem with that channel is obviously a group of friends will not buy more than 1, 2, 3 barrels. They're not going to buy a large volume. So we're looking at a large volume business, and therefore that's something that we won't be using as much. Moving on, from the distribution perspective, we thought that this would be very interesting to wrap everything up in a fund. And because I think there are a lot of intricacies of holding whiskey, insuring whiskey, making sure that the right content is being made, making sure that they're sold properly, the management and maintenance of that. So we thought it would actually make sense for us to put it all in a fund and then have the investors invest in the fund and we go manage that. And once again, Wave Financial is a America SEC registered investment advisor. Our job is there to manage the whiskey inventory and so forth. So we thought that would be something that would be of good service for clients. So as I mentioned before, we are working with a distiller called Wilderness Trail. They're about 10 years old, and they actually are a very well-regarded distiller out of Kentucky. They're not famous internationally yet because their focus is really on selling domestically in America. They're not focused on exporting because their inventory hasn't been big so far. They will probably start international expansion in a few years. We have a great relationship with them. They're one of the best distillers in Kentucky, have the most, up-to-date, state-of-the-art, high-tech distiller in Kentucky. And the owners there are also, in the yeast business, in the fermentation business. So they're experts in that space, and a lot of distillers rely on them. So it's a great facility. They're great staff, and we decided to work with them. They've also they're part of the Kentucky, excuse me. Excuse me. They're also part of the Kentucky Bourbon Trail, which is a something that the Kentucky Distillers Association is promoting. It is a a chain of distilleries that the Kentucky Distillers Association that recommend you visit when you visit Kentucky. So there's some of the big brands are on there. The Four Roses and the Jim Beams are also on that map, along with Wilderness Trail. And Wilderness Trail has won many different awards. And I think the latest one I can think of is actually they got a 94-point rating from wine enthusiasts for their rye bourbon. And that's a great rating. And this is for the 2020 review. In 2020, wine and enthusiasts published a top 100 whiskey and top 100 spirits of 2020. And out of that, there were 16 bourbon brands. And out of the 16 bourbon brands, they were number 4. They were beaten out by 3 bottles of very rare collectible whiskey from the likes of Four Roses and stuff. So we believe that they're very well positioned, and what they do is very good. I'll talk a little bit about our 2020 fund, which we also bought from Wilderness Trail. Wilderness Trail actually makes 3 different types of whiskey. They have their black label, their yellow label, and their green label. Their black label is actually a rye bourbon, so it's actually got a little more rye to it. And it's 64% corn because it's a bourbon. It has to be at least 51% corn. And then there's 24% rye and 12% barley. So we have 1,250 barrels of this whiskey. So that's a lot of whiskey, and that's for this specific type. We also have a wheated bourbon, which is our yellow label. It's 64% corn, 24% wheat, and 12% barley. So it's a lot smoother flavor profile. It's not as sharp. It's a little bit sweeter, a little bit smoother. So that's quite popular in America. So the Jim Beams of the world are all leaning towards the wheated bourbon side. It's a very Kentucky thing. We own 10,050 barrels of that, or 1,050 barrels of that. And finally, we own about 450 barrels of rye whiskey, which is 56% rye, 33% corn, and 11% barley. And that has a slightly stronger flavor profile, a slightly stronger aroma profile. Not saying it's stronger because it's got more alcohol. I'm saying it's stronger really by the taste and the profile. Since setting up the fund, in December of last year, over the past 6 months, we've actually calculated an increase in value of our portfolio by about 12%, which I think is a great number, and it's on track for our 20% IRR type numbers. So, we're quite excited about that. I think I've talked about Wilderness Trail a bit. I think we have now a production capacity of about 10,000 barrels, which is about $10 million worth of investments from them, and we're able to put that inventory to use. And we're looking forward to having investors join us in our next fund. And we will take the money. We will discuss with Wilderness Trail with regards to the right mix of mash bills and recipes and so forth. And we'll put away alcohol there. One separate thing that we're doing that is very interesting is that we're using the blockchain to create whiskey tokens. And this is an optional feature for those of you that don't want to be involved here. You can ignore this altogether. We're doing an investment fund. You invest in it at the beginning, you get your fund money out at the end. This process is going to be about 5 to 6 years. And for those clients within those 5 to 6 years, they want to do something. What we're going to do is we're going to issue tokens that represent the fractional ownership of the fund. So you can basically go into the market and sell those your ownership of the fund to other investors through this token process. We've already signed a letter with INX, one of the biggest security token exchanges in America, to list our token on their exchange. So we expect to be able to do that, very, very soon. I'll talk a little bit about storage. We're using White Dog storage this time. For our first fund, we kept our whiskey actually at Wilderness Trail. Wilderness Trails facilities are a little bit older, and they are, on site, so we prefer that. But they have run out of storage capacity. They actually own a lot of whiskey, and they continue to produce whiskey that they're keeping in inventory. So we're not able to have access to that for the second fund. I've gone out and secured storage, which was extremely difficult to do. So I had to pre-contract for a set amount for a set period of time. So we've got a contract in place with White Dog Storage at an aggressive price. And White Dog Storage is one of the newest providers of storage. It's very high tech. The temperature is to a certain extent controlled. The ventilation system is very advanced, and that's something that is very important for whiskey aging. Security and monitoring and so forth. The facilities are very good with that. And I think we've secured 5,000 barrel plus worth of storage space, so we can use that immediately. I'm hoping that the construction of warehouses will catch up at Wilderness Trail. So if we get even more demand than that, we'll go back to Wilderness Trail for storage. And also, if we end up working with other distillers, also, we'll try to source the storage separately from that. The storage concept is actually very important. One of the biggest risks associated with whiskey is actually natural disasters, and much more specifically with fire. Imagine you have a wooden barrel with very high percentage of alcohol content, typically 60%, 120 proof or more, in a wooden barrel in a wooden warehouse. When there's a fire, the whole thing just burns down. The police department, the fire department will come and supervise it as it burns down, but they will not try to stop the fire because it's very difficult to stop that fire. So we have, we're using some of the best storage facilities for some of this, but to be fully transparent, we're also insuring the barrels for market value. So if it does get destroyed due to weather and so forth, we're actually fully covered, and we would recover the market value of our whiskey. So from that perspective, that's another risk angle that we're able to cover, in advance as part of the structure. As I mentioned before, I'll just get into a little bit of details. We're running this Kentucky Whiskey Fund. It's the 2021 version. The portfolio manager is Wave Financial LLC, which is a firm that I run. We're charging, a 5% upfront fee and then 1% running. And then at the back end, we have a 15% performance fee on the excess return. And under contract, we have written that we will only take that 15% after the barrels are sold and not just for mark to market. Officially speaking, our minimum size is $100,000 US. If you need to be below that and you're interested, please feel free to come talk to us about that. We'll see what we can do. And right now we're targeting for this fund to be closed at the end of the year. And we're hoping to get enough interest out of Japan and out of others to try to launch this. We've got already a number of soft commitments. We're starting to close them right now. So I've got a few other slides. Just really some pictures to show everyone, get everybody a feel of the business. I didn't know that we were going to have camera problems. Otherwise, I would have put my own photo up here somewhere. But this is Stephanie. This is our consultant. She does annual research for us on the whiskey market. She's gathering industry data through a lot of the databases that are available that we're paying for, and also through her relationships with a lot of the distillers on the ground and a lot of the brokers who are brokering these barrel transactions. So she has a very good sense of pricing and so forth, and we're happy to be working with her. We also have an advisor, Mark Dotere. He actually runs his own distiller called Dueling Ground Distillery. It's a very high-end, very small output distiller. And, we're working with him really on an advisory basis so that he can teach us which mash bills would probably be best for the inventory that we should hold and so forth. So, it's great to have Mark assist us in a lot of the whiskey side of things. I'm going to skip through this slide, and I think it would be best for me to just really show some of the photos. I think that would be good. I'll come back and introduce our firm a little bit later. Wanted to share some photos because I think some of these presentations, the photos actually, sometimes the most interesting. So I actually took these photos myself. As part of my first few trips out to Kentucky. The first photo on the upper left hand corner is their lobby and their greeting room. There they have a small mini bar. You can go and you can do tasting. They usually have a bartender on site that can do neat on the rocks or cocktail and so forth. On the left side, they've got some, gifts and just, and trinkets and so forth with the Wilderness Trail logos on there. More importantly, if you look at that glass piece in the back, it actually is, on the back of that is actually a distillery, which is a very large tank. And moving to the center photo, so just to actually give a little feel for what a distillery process looks like. I think, I went through and saw the whole process, so it was very educational for me. I'm hoping to share that with all of you. To distill whiskey is actually just a 4-day process at Wilderness Trail. On the first day, they take the grains similar to the grains I talked about before, corn, wheat, or rye, and barley. They put it in this cooker, which is, in the photo in the center. It's a big cooker. They put water in it. They heat it up. They cool it down. They heat it up. They cool it down. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to break the sugars out of the grains into this soup. After that's done, they transfer it into a fermentation tank, which is the photo on the right, and that's on the second day. On the second day, they have it in the tank, they add yeast, and the yeast over a 2-day process will convert the sugar into alcohol. So basically, moving on to the next slide. So there are a number of different tanks that they have this in. They spend 2 days sitting in these tanks. The yeast will convert alcohol to sugar. And after that's done, on the 4th day, the content of these fermenters are fed into either a pot still, which is what you're seeing in the center photo in the front. These are smaller, more handcrafted type of process, or the column stills, which are in the back. They're 2 large columns that can process a lot more alcohol. So what you would do is you could take this mix that we've been cooking for the past 3 days, put it into this, and extract the alcohol out of it. Typically, the alcohol is extracted at 130, 140 proof, which is 65 to 70% alcohol. And they water that down a little bit to get to 120 proof, which is 60% alcohol. And that 120% proof, 120 proof, 60% alcohol is then put in a wooden barrel and basically stored in their storage or in somebody else's storage. That whole process really only takes 4 days. Because of how much alcohol is in these liquids, they don't want to leave this around. They want to put it in a barrel and keep it on a shelf, which is a safe way to keep this. So on the lower right-hand side, I do have a photo of their what they call the rick house, with their warehouse. And you can see the barrels that are in there. They're in storage. As you can see, it's a wooden structure. It's kept relatively dark. There are windows to try to let some light in. And the whole point of this process is that during the day, the warehouse heats up and the alcohol heats up, and the alcohol is absorbed into the wood, the wooden barrel. And over time, it's absorbed in the wood. And then at night, when it gets cold, the wood releases the alcohol back into the barrel. The following day, the wood will absorb the alcohol again and then release it at night. So kind of really going through the cycle is what you're seeing in terms of aging. You're getting a more mellow flavor profile because it's gone through the wood a number of times, but also you're getting a golden brown color from the wood, from the parts of the wood that's coming into the alcohol. So last slide in terms of some of the pictures on the left-hand side, this is actually something I'm very proud of. It's actually one of our barrels. We actually have this barrel, and this is one of our 2,700 barrels. I know it's hard to see, but in the upper right-hand corner of the serial number, there's actually a WAV on there. This is one of the barrels we own. And all of these pictures are from our inventory. The picture in the middle, this is one of the barrels that we own, that they're filling it up right now. And that's the filling process. So they have this big pipe in the middle, they pipe it in, they put the alcohol in it, and they seal it with a wooden plug. So what you're seeing is that process where the alcohol is going in. And I don't really call that whiskey. A lot of times they call it white dog or white dog whiskey. White dog is unaged whiskey, and unaged whiskey, most people don't really drink it. It's much sharper. It doesn't have that mellow flavor that whiskey's known for. So it's not really much of a product. I know a few distillers, just to be interesting, have released white dog whiskey products, but it's not that popular. It's not something that people really enjoy. And then on the right hand side, just a quick photo of this is the inventory we have. And we're given samples of the inventory, and they come in little sample bottles, and I have that in my house. So that's kind of the general process around whiskey, the creation, the aging, and the investments, and so forth. So just to back up a few slides, as a very quick introduction about us as Wave Financial. As I mentioned before, I'm one of the founders of Wave Financial. I'm the president. We set this firm up in 2018 to invest in blockchain, cryptocurrencies, digital assets, and so on and so forth. And whiskey was one specific project that we wanted to do as part of the digital asset security token infrastructure. So that's what we're doing. And separate from the whiskey, we actually do many other different funds. We have a Bitcoin fund, we have a crypto fund, we have a VC fund in the crypto space. We also have an NFT fund, as James had mentioned before, and we just have a very wide variety of things that we do. And that's half of our company, and the other half we actually do customized wealth management in the crypto space for large investors. So I'm going to stop here. Oh, I found my own photo in bio. I forgot I had this photo in here. So that's me, and we've got my background there. One other thing I didn't mention at the beginning is that I'm starting to teach at UCLA crypto finance. So I'm a professor at UCLA now. So so I'm going to pause here. I think it's about 40 minutes, which I think is a good time. I would love to leave the rest of the time to answer questions. I see one question already, and I'm going to try to answer that. So just give me one moment here. Let me leave some photos of whiskey on out here. I think that's interesting. So one question I have is, will you be expanding into other whiskey brands with more geographical diversity in the future? We are looking at that right now. I think there's a certain level of difficulty in sourcing good whiskey. We were very lucky to have built a relationship with Wilderness Trail. It was through a number of great connections and great relationships that we were able to build this business relationship. So we treasure that very much, and we're focused on Wilderness Trail for now. We would be happy to work with more distillers. The highest quality whiskeys, from an American standard, really comes from Kentucky, and I believe 80% of the bourbon come from Kentucky. So when we said we want to do a Kentucky fund, I didn't think it would limit us very much. So we're happy with that geographical coverage. We're happy to look at Tennessee whiskey. We're happy to look at Indiana whiskey. There's a large distiller out there, but as you expand out, some places, the Indiana mass produced one is not something we're really interested in adding to our inventory. But Tennessee could be a possibility. But our current focus is on the Kentucky side, and we believe that that's where that value is. Also, we have relationships with the Kentucky Distillers Association. I spent a lot of time with them, and they're happy to introduce us to other Kentucky distillers as we need, if we need more in terms of build out. In terms of kind of bigger picture, I've been asked before about, hey, would you do Japanese whiskey? Would you do Scottish whiskey, and so forth? Japanese whiskey, I think, is a little bit difficult. I think, the business is very vertically integrated, so it's difficult for me to go to the likes of Suntory to say, hey, can I buy some of your barrels, hold it on the side, and you can have it back later, or not, right? That's something that, as a vertically integrated business, they're not particularly excited about. Also, I think, Japanese balance sheet for very large corporates like Suntory is so cheap, they don't need our help in holding inventory for them. We've looked at Scottish whiskey. I have a little less familiarity with them. It's also a somewhat esoteric field, so we haven't gotten actively involved, but we'd be happy to look at that.
Okay. Benjamin, I'll just go through that in Japanese briefly.
Sure, yeah.
はい。その質問は、他の地域も、これから、やることを考えてますかと。そう考えてます。一応、ケンタッキー州のウィルドネス・トレイルというディスティラーと非常に関係できてますけれども、ただ、ケンタッキー州も、そのディスティラーズの協会の紹介でもっと、考えるし、あとは、近くのテネシー州、インディアナ州もありますので、非常に関係を持っています。まあ、日本の考えてるけれども、ただ、やっぱりちょっと、やりにくいというか、ちょっとバローをアクセスするのは難しいんじゃないかなと思って、あとはスコットランドも検討してるんですけれども、ただ、まだ、そんなに知らないので、これから一応検討できると思います。Okay, so I have another question for you then. Just the new fund, Whiskey Fund 2. So is it correct that you expect that to wrap up in 5 to 6 years, and then what are the expected returns on that?
Yeah, we have similar expectations on the return profile. We believe that we'd be aging this whiskey 4 to 6 years. We'll start selling it around year 4, hopefully wrap up that sales before year 6. We expect that on a very rough basis, about a 5-year IRR, so an annual return of about 20%. And that's a net number after our fees and so forth, and expenses and so forth.
Okay. 質問は、次のファンド、ウィスキーファンド2の方は一応5、6年間で、やるんですか？またはリターンはどのぐらいですかと。一応、一応4年か6年から、考えています。一応売るのはやっぱり4年目になるだろうかと思います。またはその5年間の、年間のリターンは一応 20%、考えています。Okay, let's see. So, would you like to just briefly more explain the current status of Whiskey Fund 1 and what stage it's at?
Yeah, sure. So let me pull this slide back up here. I'm still sharing my screen. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, great. So yeah, so this is what Fund 1 looks like. And right now, as I mentioned before, we have, about 46% of our inventory is in rye bourbon, about 37% is in wheated bourbon, and 16.7% is in rye whiskey. And, this is the 2020 fund. This is what we hold right now, and we're aging that right now. I think the wheated bourbon barrels we've owned since last September. So we've gone over a year on that. The rye bourbon is a little bit newer, really around end of last year, beginning of this year. And the rye whiskey we got more recently. So, it's aging just fine. So we had a end of March, pricing, estimate. And our estimate is that the fund is up about, 11.87%, which is, let's just call it 12%, is kind of the 6-month rise right now, which is in line with our 20% IRR target. Once again, we haven't sold any whiskey. So this is, our estimates using industry data. But market is moving up, and we believe that that's a solid number.
Okay. 質問は、ウイスキーファンド1、一応2020年に、できたファンドはどうなってますかと。一応ご覧のような数字になっています。そのパーセント割合。あとは、今年の3月には一応、12%、6ヶ月間 12% 上がったと。そしてちょっと IR のターゲット、リターンの年間のターゲットは一応 20% になってますので、非常にオンラインになっています。Okay. Were you able to kind of briefly explain the other funds that you're doing? Just the Bitcoin fund and maybe the NFT fund, just very briefly?
Yeah, sure. So, so we also run a Bitcoin fund that is a yield fund. So, we have a fund that we hold Bitcoin on behalf of clients and rewrite call options on that, and that generates a an income every single month because we write options every single month, and we've been paying out that return every single month to clients. So. The fund was launched in 2019, and we paid out 1.5% or more every single month since 2019 for our investors. So that's been an attractive product. People like that. Also, it captures a portion of the upside of Bitcoin. So last year's return was, net return after all the expenses and so forth. The return was 193%. So it was very good last year. And this year it's up over 90% also. So, it's been a good product, good investment for all of our investors. So that's our Bitcoin fund. We also have the NFT fund. Our NFT fund is focused on 70% on holding NFTs and doing work with the NFTs. And then the 30% is on platforms, protocols, and early stage businesses, associated with that space. We believe there's an opportunity for both, so we invest in both. And we're actually a very large player, very well-known player in the NFT space. We have great relationships. We've been speaking with a lot of big players about teaming up with them and working with them. So.
OK。質問は、他のファンド、ビットコインファンドと NFT ファンド、ちょっと説明してください。一応、ビットコインファンドは、大体月ごとに投資家が投資して、僕たちは一応そのビットコインを持っています。そして、大体のリターンは、毎月 1.5% になっています。そして一応、ファンドとしては、2020年は一応、193% に上がった。あとは今年は今までは一応 90% 上がっています。NFT ファンドは70% は一応ホールディング、NFT のホールディング、あとは 30% がそのプラットフォームに投資する。両方投資しているので、Wave Financial は両方、NFT の業界ではかなり知られている会社です。Okay. Okay, so does anyone else have any questions? You can post them in Q&A or chat. Okay, Benjamin, is there any other points you'd like to just kind of emphasize, or any things you'd like to say to the participants?
No, I think we've covered generally the points that we typically cover, and I think this is a fund that we believe very strongly about. We've actually had quite a number of Japanese investors come and invest. So out of our fund, I would say probably over 30-40% of the investors actually come from Japan. So from that perspective, it's very interesting, and I would love to see if there are people who are interested in exploring this some more. I'm happy to spend time with all of you and talk about this in more detail.
Okay. Okay. じゃあ皆さん、今日、成長していただきありがとうございます。一応、大体ご覧の通りになっています。今までは一応、日本から30か40% ぐらいの投資家が日本から、投資しています。だから皆さん、興味あれば、ぜひ、近いうちに連絡してください。ぜひ相談したいと思います。ありがとうございます。Okay, well, I guess maybe we'll end there. So thank you very much. And so we'll as Benjamin said, we'll be sending you the recording link and also the slides. So you can be in touch with Pacifica or Benjamin directly for inquiries. So thank you again for making time today. Sorry about the camera mix-up, but anyway, you saw Benjamin's photo and heard his golden tones and everything. So we'll set up conversations going forward. Okay, so thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Benjamin, for making time today at the very late hour.
No problem. Thank you very much. I look forward to hearing back from everyone. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.